it's Miss Drew coming at you reading A Long Walk to Water by Linda Sue Park.
Salva stayed in the women's barn again that night. He began to make a plan. Maybe I can stay here until the fighting stops. Then I will go back to my village and find my family. He worked hard so that she would not send him away. For 3 days he fetched firewood from the bush and water from the pond, but the pond was drying up. Each day it was harder to fill the gourds. During the daytime, Salva could hear a distant booming of artillery from the fighting a few miles away. With every shell that exploded, he would think of his family, hoping they were safe, wondering desperately when he would be with them again. On the 4th day, the old woman told him that she was leaving. "You have seen the pond is only a puddle now. Winter is coming in the dry season. And this fighting," she nodded her head in the direction of the noise, "I will go to a different village near water. You cannot stay with me any longer." Salva stared at her as panic rose inside him. Why can't I go with her? The woman spoke again, before he could ask aloud. "The soldiers will leave me alone, an old woman on her own. It would be more dangerous for me to travel with you." She shook her head in sympathy. "I am sorry I cannot help you anymore," she said. "Wherever it is you walk, just be sure to walk away from the fighting." Salva stumbled back to the barn. "What will I do? Where will I go?" The words repeated themselves 1,000 times in his head. It was so strange. He had known the old woman for only a few days, but now he could not imagine what he would do once she was gone. He sat inside the barn and stared out, looking at nothing. As the light grew dimmer, the noises of evening began, the buzz of insects, the rustling of dry leaves, and another sound? Voices. Salva turned his head towards the sound. Yes, it was voices. Some people were walking towards the house, a small group, fewer than a dozen. As they approached, Salva took a sharp breath. In the fading light, he could see the faces of those nearest him. 2 of the men had patterns of V-shaped scars on their forehead. Dinka patterns again, the kind that were given to the boys in Salva's village as a part of the ritual of becoming a man. These people were Dinka too. Could his family be among him? Chapter 4. Southern Sudan, 2008. Naya's mother took the plastic containers from her and emptied the water into 3 large jugs. She handed Naya a bowl of boiled sorghum meal and poured a little milk over it. Naya sat down in the shade of the house and ate it. When she was done, she took the bowl back inside. Her mother was nursing the baby, Naya's little brother. "Take Akir with you," her mother said, nodding towards Naya's sister. Glancing at her young sister, Naya did not say what she was thinking, that Akir, who was only 5 years old, was too small and walked too slowly. "She needs to learn," her mother said. Naya nodded, and she picked up the plastic container and took Akir by the hand. Home for just long enough to eat, Naya would now make her second trip to the pond. To the pond and back, to the pond and back, nearly a full day of walking altogether. This was Naya's daily routine 7 months of the year. Daily. Every single day. Southern Sudan, 1985. Salva held his breath as he scanned the faces, one by one. Then the air left his lungs and seemed to take all hope with it. Strangers. No one from his family. The old woman came behind him and greeted the group. "Where are you going?" she asked. A few people exchanged uneasy glances. There was no reply. The woman put her hand on Salva's shoulder. "This one is alone. Will you take him with you?" Salva saw doubt on the people's faces. Several men at the front of the group began speaking to each other. "He is a child. He will slow us down." "Another mouth to feed? It's already hard enough to find food. He is too young to do any real work. He'll be of no help to us." Salva hung his head. They would leave him behind again, just like the others had. Then a woman in the group reached out and touched the arm of one of the men. She said nothing, but looked first at the man and then at Salva. The man nodded and turned to the group. "We will take him with us," he said. Salva looked up quickly. A few of the group were shaking their heads and grumbling. The man shrugged. "He is Dinka," he said, and began walking again. The old woman gave Salva a bag of peanuts and a gourd for drinking water. He thanked her and said goodbye. Then he caught up with the group, determined not to lag behind, not to complain, not to be any trouble to anyone. He did not even ask where they were going, for fear that his questions would be unwelcomed. He knew that they were Dinka, and that they were trying to stay away from the war. He had to be content with that. The days became a never-ending walk. Salva's feet kept time with the thoughts in his head, and the same words over and over. "Where's my family? Where's my family?" Every day he woke and walked with the group, rested at midday, and walked again until dark. They slept on the ground. The terrain changed from scrub to woodland, and then walked among strands of stunted trees. There was little to eat, a few fruit here and there, always either unripe or warm rotten. Salva's peanuts were gone by the end of the third day. After about a week, they were joined by more people, another group of Dinka, and several members of a tribe called the Jern Chol. Men and women, boys and girls, young and old, walking to nowhere. Salva had never been so hungry. He stumbled along, somehow moving one foot ahead of the other, not noticing the ground he walked on, or the forest around him, or the light in the sky. Nothing was real except his hunger. Once a hollow in his stomach, but now a deep buzzing pain in every part of him. Usually he walked around among the Dinka, but today, shuffling along in the days, he found that he had fallen a little behind. Walking next to him, a young man from the Jol Chol. Salva didn't know much about him, except that his name was Burska. As they walked along, Burska slowed down. Salva wondered sluggishly if they shouldn't try to keep up a bit better. But then Burska stopped walking. Salva stopped too, but he was too weak and hungry to ask why they were standing still. Burska cocked his head and furrowed his brow, listening. They stood motionless for several moments. Salva could hear the noise of the rest of the group ahead of them, a few faint voices, birds calling something in the trees. He strained his ears. What was it? Jet planes? Bombs? Was the gunfire getting closer instead of further away? Salva's fear began to grow until he was even stronger than his hunger. Then, a slow smile appeared. A small smile spread over Burska's face. "There, you hear it?" Salva frowned and shook his head. "Yes, there it is again. Come." Burska began walking very quickly. Salva struggled to keep up. Twice Burska paused and listened, then kept going even faster. "What?" Salva started to ask. Burska stopped abruptly in front of the large tree. "Yes," he said. "Now, go call the others." By now, Salva had caught the feeling of excitement. But what shall I tell them? The bird, the one I was listening to, he led me right here. Burska's smile was even bigger now. "You see that?" He pointed up at the branches of the tree. "Beehive. A fine large one." Salva hurried off to call the rest of the group. He had heard of this, that the Jewel Chol could find the call of a bird called the honey guide. But he had never seen it done before. Honey! This night they would feast. Alright, Chapter 5, Southern Sudan, 2008. There was a big lake 3 days' walk from Naya's village. Every year when the rain stops and the pond near the village dried up, Naya's family moved their home to a camp nearby the big lake. Naya's family did not live by the lake all year round because of the fighting. Her tribe, the Nuer, often fought with the rival Dinka tribe over the land surrounding the lake. So remember, these are the two tribes. Naya comes from the tribe that is opposed to Salva's tribe. Men and boys were hunted and even killed when the two groups clashed. So Naya and the rest of her village lived at the lake only during the 5 months of dry season, when both tribes were so busily struggling for survival that fighting occurred far less often. Like the pond back home, the lake was dried up, but because it was much bigger than a pond, the clay of the lake bed still held water. Naya's job at the lake camp was the same at home, to fetch water. With her hands, she would dig up a hole in the dry clay of the lake bed. She kept digging, scooping out handfuls of clay until the hole was deep, as her arm was long. The clay got wetter as she dug until at last water began to seep into the bottom of the hole. The water that filled the hole was filthy, more mud than liquid. It seeped in so slowly that it would take a long time to collect even a few gourds full. Naya would crouch by the hole waiting for water, here for hours at a time, and every day for 5 long months until the rains came and she and her family could return home. Back to southern Sudan, 1985. Salva's eyes were swollen shut. Buska's forearms were lumpy and raw. A friend of Buska had a fat lip. They all looked as if they'd been through a terrible fist fight, but the injuries weren't bruises. They were bee stings. A fire had been started under the tree to smoke the bees out of the hive and make them sleepy. But as Buska and the other jewel coal men were removing the hive from the tree, the bees woke up, and they were not happy to discover that their home had been taken away. They expressed their unhappiness very clearly by buzzing, swarming, and stinging a lot. It was worth it, Salva thought as he touched his eye gingerly. His belly was round lumps stuffed full of honey and beeswax. Nothing had ever tasted so good as those pieces of honeycomb dripping with rich, luscious gold sweetness. Along with everyone else in the group, he had eaten as much as he could hold, and then a little more. All around him, people were licking their fingers in great satisfaction, except for one Dinka man, who had been stung on his tongue. It was swollen so badly that he could not close his mouth. He could hardly swallow. Salva felt sorry for him. The poor man couldn't even enjoy the honey. The walking seemed easier now that Salva had something in his belly. He had managed to save one last piece of the honeycomb and wrapped it carefully in a leaf. By the end of the next day, all the honey was gone, but Salva kept the beeswax in his mouth and chewed it for the memory of sweetness. The group got a little bigger with each passing day. More people joined them, people who had been walking alone or in little clusters of 2 or 3. Salva made it a habit to survey the whole group every morning and evening, searching for his family. But they were never among the newcomers. One evening, a few weeks after Salva had joined the group, he had made his usual walk around the fireside, scanning every face in hope of seeing a familiar one. Then, ouch! Salva had almost lost his footing on the ground underneath him, seemed to move. A boy jumped to his feet and stood in front of him. "Hey, that was my hand you stepped on." The boy spoke Dinka, but with a different accent, which meant that he was not from the area around Salva's village. Salva took a step back. "Sorry, are you hurt?" The boy opened and closed his hand a few times, then shrugged. "It's all right, but you should really watch where you're going." "Sorry," Salva replied. After a moment of silence, he turned away and began searching the crowd again. The boy was still looking at him. "Your family?" he asked. Salva shook his head. "Me too," said the boy. He sighed, and Salva heard that sigh all the way to his heart. Their eyes met. "I'm Salva." "I'm Mariel." It was good to make a friend. Mariel was the same age as Salva. They were almost the same height. When they walked side by side, their strides were exactly the same length. And the next morning, they began to walk together. "Do you know where we're going?" Salva asked. Mariel tilted his head up and put his hand on his brow to shade his eyes from the rising sun. East, he said wisely. We're walking into the morning sun. Salva rolled his eyes. I know where we're going east, he said. Anyone could tell that, but where is in the east? Mario thought for a moment. Ethiopia, he said. East of Sudan is Ethiopia. Salva stopped walking. Ethiopia? That's another country. We can't walk all the way there. We're walking east, Meryl said firmly. Ethiopia is east. I can't go to another country, Salva thought. If I do, my family will never find me. Mariel put his arm around Salva's shoulders. He seemed to know what Salva was thinking, for he said, It doesn't matter. Don't you know that if we keep walking east, we'll go all the way around the world and come right back to Sudan? That's when we'll find our families. Salva had to laugh. They were both laughing as they started walking again, arm in arm, their strides matching perfectly. More than a month had passed since Salva had run from his school into the bush. The group was now walking in the land of the Atul people. In Dinka language, the Atut people were the people of the lion. Their region was inhabited by large herds of antelope, wildebeests, and guns, and the lions that preyed on them. The Dinka told stories about the Atut. When the Atut person died, he came back to earth as a lion, with great hunger for human flesh he once had. The lion in the Atut region were said to be the fiercest in the world. Nights became uneasy. Salva woke up to the sound of roars in the distance, and sometimes to the death squeal of an animal under a lion's claw. One morning, he woke barely-eyed after a poor sleep. He rubbed his eyes, rose, and stumbled after Mariel as they began walking yet again. Salva? It was not Mariel who had spoken. The voice had come from behind him. Salva turned around. His mouth fell open in amazement, but he could not speak. Salva! And we're gonna leave it right there at that perfect ending. We'll find out what happens to Salva next in my next video. Everyone stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!